So today we have to begin the discussion of Jaina epistemology. So now every day we should try to forget what we have done yesterday because of course with regard to Jainism what we are going to do today we need not forget tomorrow because it will be continuation. In the case of Buddhism it was also discontinuation from Nagarjuna to Dimnaga Dharmakirti. So in the last three lectures we have dealt with the epistemologies of Nyaya and Buddhism. We can say about Nyaya that it was an epistemological system from its very inception. We cannot say so about Buddhism. Buddhism as a philosophical approach was primarily moral and soteriological. It was concerned with the problem of suffering and human emancipation. It also carried a broad epistemological perspective which emphasized experience and reason. Its broad epistemological perspective was further articulated and systematized by later Buddhist philosophers, and hence we have what can be called Buddhist epistemology. Similar was the condition of many other philosophical schools of India. They were not epistemological in their primary stage, but developed their epistemology at a later stage. For example, the early stage of Vedanta philosophy can be found in Upanishads. In Upanishads, we do find some talk of scriptural, rational, and direct knowledge of the ultimate reality, but no theory of pramanas as such. Similarly, the early literature of Jainism is the Jaina Agamas. In these texts also we have a broad epistemological approach, but not the Jaina theory of pramanas. The Jaina theory of pramanas was developed by the later Jaina philosophers as a result of the interaction with the other schools of Indian philosophy. In fact, a common feature of these three philosophical systems, namely Buddhism, Jainism and Vedanta, is that we can distinguish between their two stages, scriptural stage and epistemological logical stage. Indra Chandra Shastri in his work Jaina Epistemology distinguishes between two schools of Jaina epistemology, canonical school and logic school, that is Agama school and Tarka school. Some of the major differences between the two schools he brings out are as follows. A canonical school begins from 300 BC, whereas logic school begins from 6th century CE. In the canonical school, knowledge is understood as a means to liberation. In the logic school, knowledge is a means to ascertain reality. The canonical school developed without external influence. The logic school developed in interaction with other schools. Faith is the dominant feature of the canonical school. Appeal to reason is the main feature of the logic school. However, I suggest that in spite of such differences, there is continuity between the two schools. The view to knowledge reflected in canonical school was reconstructed, developed and substantiated through rational means in the logic school. So in what follows, we will consider first the broad approach to knowledge reflected in the Jaina canonical literature, and then turn to systematization of Jaina epistemology in the literature of the logic school. We will discuss Jaina epistemology in the following order. First, we will discuss the salient features of the Jaina epistemology in its early stage, that is, as it is found in the canonical school. Since the early Jaina epistemology is necessarily related to Jain soteriology, a brief exposition of Jaina soteriology will be given first. Then we will discuss how there was transition from the early theory of knowledge to the Jaina theory of pramana, as it is found in the logic school. Then we will discuss different defining features of pramana, and we will then deal with the question of the classification of pramanas. So all this we are going to do in this part of the lecture, first part. And the defining features and classification we will do in the second part, and up to the transition that is first and second point we will deal with in the first part, third and fourth point we will deal with in the second part, and in tomorrow's lecture we will deal with different types of pramanas in detail. Now, a brief exposition to Jaina soteriology. Jainas accept threefold path to liberation. Right faith, Samyak Darshana, that is faith in the basic principles. 2. Right knowledge, Samyak Jnana, knowledge of the reality consisting of 6 substances. 3. Right conduct, Samyak Charitra, pursuit of moral perfection and austerities. So these, all the three together, according to them, is the path towards liberation. Not just right knowledge, not just right path, but of course in these three, right conduct has a special role to play. You can say that the right conduct, which is based on right faith and right knowledge, ultimately will lead to liberation according to Jainism. Now we have talked about right faith as faith in the basic principles. So what are the basic principles? Basic principles related to liberation. So there are 7 basic principles. One is soul, then non-soul, that is what is other than soul, the substances other than soul. Then there is the third principle called inflow, asrava, inflow of karmic matter into the soul. Then bondage, binding of karmic particles to the soul, which is caused by inflow. And then stoppage, that is samvara, stopping the inflow of karmic particles into the soul. Purgation, nirjara, removal of karmic particles, karmic matter from the soul. And lastly, liberation, moksha, complete freedom from karma or karmic particles. Now, what is reality? Because while talking about samyak jnana, right knowledge, we say that it is the knowledge of reality, means the substances, 6 substances. So, real, sat, is in Jainism it is identified with dravya, that is substance. And substance is defined as that which has stable as well as changing characteristics. Stable characteristics are called guna and changing characteristics are called paryaya. So the definition of dravya is guna paryayavad dravyam. Dravya is that which has gunas and paryayas, stable characteristics and changing characteristics. Then it is also identified, when dravya is identified with sat. How is sat defined? Sat is defined as that which has origination, destruction as well as stability. Utpada, vyaya, dravya, yuktam, sat. So utpada, origination, vyaya, destruction, and dravya, that is dhruvatva, stability. All these three characterize what is real. And then 6 substances according to them are soul, matter, the word for matter is pudgala, then medium of motion, dharma, medium of stability, adharma. So dharma, adharma, which are elsewhere used in moral and religious sense, here they are used in purely ontological sense. That is, one is the medium of motion and the other is medium of stability, dharma and adharma. Then space, akasha, and time, kala. These are the 6 substances according to them. And every substance has stable characteristics and changing characteristics and so on and so forth. So they are defined in that way. Now, right conduct consists of 5 great vows, namely, now great vows and small vows, they distinguish between the vows, that is these rules of conduct which an ordinary follower has to follow, and great vows are those which the monks who are directly concerned with liberation, they have to follow. So the great vows, namely non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, celibacy and non-possession, ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya and aparigraha. And in addition to that, right conduct includes many other austere practices such as fasting, and a great elaboration is there, we will not go into that. Now, Soul. So out of all these substances, soul is very important because we are concerned with consciousness, knowledge, and so on and so forth. So every living being, including animals, plants, and other natural bodies, is a soul, or they are, everything is a soul, so to say. Of course, not everything. For example, this table is not a soul, but tree from which the table is produced was a soul. So by killing the tree, we have the table has been produced. The defining characteristic of soul is consciousness. Unlike the soul of Nyaya, which is ubiquitous, the soul of Jainism has limited size, the same size as the body it occupies. It has capacity to contract and expand, because of which it can occupy a new body of smaller or larger size at the time of rebirth. Now, soul and karma. Karma is a kind of matter. So again, it is a different type of concept of karma. Karma, one meaning is of course action, but according to Jainas, by performing various kinds of actions, the jiva invites, so to say, karmic matter. So karma here is understood in the sense of matter, a kind of pudgala. The word for matter is pudgala. So there are karma pudgalas, minute particles of karma spread over the universe, and those are attracted by when one develops any passion. Even a mental action is performed, passion is developed, immediately the karmic matter is attracted by jiva, it sticks to jiva, and it creates bondage for the jiva. So soul, through its passions and actions, attracts karma particles and becomes bound. It also becomes heavy. So karma, the basic nature of jiva is that it is very light, whereas due to karma particles it becomes heavy and it sticks to this world. So through moral perfection and austerities, the soul stops the inflow of karmas and removes the karmas which have already entered. So the two principles that we talked about, one was samvara and the other was nirjara. Samvara is stopping the karmas which are entering into jiva, karmic particles which are entering into jiva, and nirjara means removing the karmic particles which have already entered into jiva. And in this way, through the purification of jiva, one becomes ultimately liberated. So through moral perfection and austerities, the soul stops the inflow of karmas and removes the karmas which have already entered. By removing karmas, it actualizes its intrinsic nature, which is full of consciousness and bliss. The free soul also becomes light because of the removal of the karmic particles which have made it heavy. So it goes upwards and upwards, and ultimately it goes to the top of the universe and stays there permanently. That is the final state of liberation. So now universe, according to them, is limited. Space is unlimited, but universe is limited, and therefore that journey, that the last journey of the soul, is not endless journey. The soul has to stop somewhere, so it stops at the top of the universe, which they call Siddhashila. So all liberated souls are there according to them. Now we come to epistemology. The salient features of the early Jaina epistemology. So roughly here I am concentrating on these three features which for me are very important. The canonical approach to knowledge has three salient features: the theory of fivefold knowledge, then the Jaina conception of omniscience, and non-absolutism, that is anekantavada. So fivefold knowledge. In the early stage of Jainism, the theory of knowledge was introduced in terms of 5 types of knowledge. And of course, there the word used is jnana. As I said, the word jnana is sometimes used in the value neutral sense, that is cognition, which can be true or false. But sometimes, for example, in Vedanta, when Shankaracharya talks about jnana, he uses he says that jnana is vastu tantra. Jnana is say controlled by the object, where it means that he means that it has objectivity. It is, so jnana is necessarily a true cognition. So when Jainas use the word jnana in this agamic, that is canonical literature, it is used in the sense of knowledge and not just cognition. So these are the 5 types of knowledge. One is mati jnana, that is empirical knowledge, shruta jnana, scriptural knowledge, and then they also talk about extrasensory perception and telepathy, so that is clairvoyance, avadhi jnana, and telepathy, manahparyaya, and ultimately supreme knowledge, kevala jnana, which is the same as omniscience. These 5 types of knowledge form a hierarchical order. Empirical knowledge is the most ordinary form of knowledge, which includes perceptual as well as inferential knowledge. It is the knowledge about worldly matters. Then scriptural knowledge, it is higher in the sense that it is about moral spiritual matters. Moreover, it is still lower than the last 3 types, because knowledge from scriptures is after all indirect knowledge. Whereas the last three types, namely clairvoyance, telepathy, and supreme knowledge, are supposed to be higher because they are the 3 types of direct knowledge. So we will come to that distinction between direct and indirect, the way in which Jainas make this distinction. Here Jainas had a peculiar concept of directness. Generally, direct knowledge is understood as the knowledge based on sense-object contact. At the most, we can talk of direct knowledge as that in which mind is directly related to its object. So in Indian tradition, either it is through indriyas, that is sense organs, or it is through manas that we can have direct knowledge. So here when I say mind, actually I should have said the soul is related to its object through mind. Through mind here is manas. Jainas, however, regarded sensory perception and mental perception as forms of indirect knowledge. That is because such knowledge, according to them, is after all mediated by sense organ or mind. So direct knowledge should be something which is not mediated by anything, but this knowledge through sense organs, knowledge through mind is mediated, and therefore it is not direct in the true sense of the term. Direct knowledge, according to Jainas, is that which the soul has without any medium. So they postulate this idea that soul can have knowledge of things without any medium. The last 3 types in the 5-fold classification of knowledge, namely clairvoyance, telepathy, and supreme knowledge, are supposed to be direct in this sense. The soul can have this type of knowledge without any mediation. In this sense, this knowledge is extrasensory and extramental. This takes us to the other aspect of the canonical school of Jaina epistemology. It is the notion of supreme knowledge. So, kevala jnana or omniscience. That is also supposed to be direct. Now, majority of Jaina philosophers accept their religious epoch makers to be omniscient in the literal sense of the term. So, I have translated Tirthankara as epoch maker. That is, though those who say introduce the path to laity anew and so to say recreate the path. According to Jainism, there is no founder of Jainism. Jaina philosophy has not been founded by anybody. It is supposed to be without beginning, so to say, because creation of the world, destruction of the world, this process has been taking place beginninglessly, without any beginning, and therefore, and in every such era of between creation and destruction of the world, there have been Tirthankaras, that is, those who give the path to the people, right path to the people, and all Tirthankaras ultimately what they teach is the Jaina philosophy. They do not teach, Buddhist epoch makers are not Tirthankaras, for example, for Jainas. Now, they are, according to them, they are omniscient, and omniscient in the literal sense of the term. Again, omniscience is not supposed to be the special prerogative of the epoch-making personalities whom they call Tirthankaras. Any liberated soul, which they call Arhat. So, Arhat is an ideal which any Jiva can aspire for, and when that Jiva becomes Arhat, he will be omniscient. He or she or it, whatever. It will be it actually, not he or she. Anyway. Moreover, Jainas generally accept omniscience in its literal sense, that is, knowledge of everything, by which is meant the knowledge of all essential as well as accidental aspects of everything. We have seen that Dravya is defined as Guna Paryayavad, that which has stable characteristics and changing characteristics. So, knowing something means knowing something with all its stable and changing characteristics. And changing characteristics means they have been changing in past, present and future. So, knowing all the characteristics, past, present and future. So, knowing one thing means knowing that thing with all its stable and changing characteristics, and in this way they know all things with all their stable and changing characteristics. They means those omniscient beings. So, that is the idea of omniscience. They define omniscience as the direct knowledge of all substances with all their past, present and future modes. According to Jainism, every soul has intrinsic capacity for infinite knowledge, Ananta Jnana, which is also called absolute knowledge, Kevala Jnana. It is direct knowledge in the sense that it is not mediated by sense organs or even by mind. Just as a lamp in the midst of a room illuminates all objects in the room, similarly the soul, though limited in size, has capacity to illuminate all objects in the world. But why is this capacity of the soul not actualized in our case? Why does soul have only limited knowledge? Jainas answer to this question Jainas answer this question in terms of their theory of karma. According to Jainas, the soul has different types of infinite capacities. They talk about 4 anantas, 4 infinite capacities, 4 types, we will see that. But they are not fully actualized because of the karmic bondage. The soul has capacity for infinite intuition, Ananta Darshana, infinite knowledge, Ananta Jnana, infinite energy, Ananta Virya, and infinite bliss, Ananta Sukha. But these capacities are not, they are obscured by different types of karma as shown in the following table. So, just as there are different types of capacities, there are different types of obscuring karmas. So, they classify karmas also into many kinds. That is, all karma pudgalas, there are karmic particles everywhere, but again, among those karmic particles, we can have different types of karmic particles, which have different functions. So, infinite intuition, that is Ananta Darshana, this capacity is obscured by what is called Darshana Varaniya Karma, that is intuition obscuring karma. Then infinite knowledge, capacity for infinite knowledge is obscured by knowledge obscuring karma, Jnana Varaniya Karma. Infinite energy, Ananta Virya, is obscured by Antaraya Karma. Antaraya means obstacle, fetter. So, that which obstructs our energy, our capacity, that is obstructing karma. Then Ananta Sukha, infinite bliss, is obscured by what is called deluding karma, Mohaniya Karma. In this way, even an ordinary soul has an intrinsic capacity to know everything, but it is obscured by the karmic particles known as knowledge obscuring karma, Jnana Varaniya Karma. From the other side, when the soul has any knowledge at all, it becomes possible only due to destruction or subsidence of the respective type of knowledge obscuring karma. So, even when they talk about knowledge obscuring karma, because there are different types of knowledge, there are different types of knowledge obscuring karma also. That is mati jnana, shruta jnana, avadhi jnana. So, with reference to mati jnana, that is empirical knowledge, there is empirical knowledge obscuring karma. With reference to shruta jnana, scriptural knowledge, there is scriptural knowledge obscuring karma. In this way, there will be 5 types of obscuring karmas also, knowledge obscuring karmas also. And then that, I mean, we already have all types of karmas, knowledge obscuring karmas. And when I see for example, suppose I have the perceptual knowledge of a table, how does that knowledge becomes possible? We may say that there is sense organ contact and so on and so forth. Now, for them, there is a question whether there can be a sense object contact in the case of visual perception. But okay, visual sense organ has something to do with the perception of the table, but that is not sufficient. What is important is there is this mati jnana varaniya karma, the empirical knowledge obscuring karma in me. That karma should be either suppressed or destroyed. For that, I mean, it could be just suppressed for the time being, because of which I am able to see the table. Then I will have a kind of temporary awareness. But if that particular type of karma is destroyed, then I will have a more stable, enduring type of awareness. So, what kind of awareness I will have, whether it will be enduring or it will be temporary, that is determined by whether the knowledge obscuring karma is only suppressed, is there only subsidence, it subsides, but it is not completely, it is not destroyed, or it is destroyed. And ultimately, for liberation according to them, there should be just not subsidence, not suppression of karma, but there should be complete destruction of karma. So, we can have knowledge sometimes due to suppression of karma, sometimes due to destruction of karma. What kind of karma? Knowledge obscuring karma. I mean, this type of thing, for example, Vedantins talk about Maya, Avidya, I mean, some kind of ignorance, which is a positive factor hindering the possibility of knowledge. And that ignorance should be removed, only then we can have knowledge. And then Vedantin also talk of 2 types of ignorance, objective as well as subjective. That is, in the objective world also, the ignorance, so to say, hides the object. There is ignorance which hides the object, the ignorance which hides the soul. And both the types of ignorance should be destroyed, only then I will have the knowledge of the thing. So, I mean, this idea of there being a kind of cover or veil which is to be destroyed in order to have knowledge. And this idea is common here, it is common to Vedanta and Jainism. But for them, of course, they make it more physical in terms of the karmic particles. I mean, there are all types of karmic particles which have stuck to our soul, and they should be either suppressed or destroyed in order to exercise the particular capacity which jiva intrinsically has. From the other side, when the soul has only knowledge at all, it becomes possible only due to destruction or subsidence of the respective type of knowledge obscuring karma. Here it is important to note how Jaina theory of knowledge is essentially different from that of Nyaya. Nyaya theory can be called contact theory of knowledge. Accordingly, even for a basic form of knowledge, namely perceptual knowledge, the contact should be established between soul and object through sense organ and mind. So, Nayayikas talk about a kind of chain of contacts. It starts from soul, then manas, then sense organ and object. When the chain is complete, we can have the knowledge of the object. Whereas in Jainism, that contact is not an essential thing. What is essential is the destruction or subsidence of the particular type of karma. So in Nyaya, hence the possibility of knowledge of everything becomes a problem in Nyaya, because in order that a soul knows everything, it has to establish contact with everything simultaneously. So I mean, omniscience is a great problem. Even when we talk about God's omniscience, how can God have omniscience? That also is a problem. Hence, Nyaya philosophers had to imagine a mystical notion called yogic contact, Yoga Lakshana Pratyasati, Yogaja Lakshana Pratyasati, in order to explain the alleged omniscience which a yoga practitioner is supposed to achieve. Jainas do not accept the contact theory of knowledge. They denied contact, that is Sannikarsha theory of perception, particularly with regard to extraordinary perception. In the case of extraordinary perception, there is no contact at all. In the case of ordinary perception, in some cases they accepted contact, in some cases they did not. Jainas claim that such a perception, that is extraordinary perception means here these three types of cognition, that is clairvoyance, telepathy and omniscience. So these are the three types of extraordinary perception. Jainas claim that such a perception occurs without any mediation of sense organs or mind. It occurs simply out of the intrinsic capacity of the soul. Jainas claim that the soul has an intrinsic capacity to know everything without establishing contact with it. Soul generally cannot exercise this capacity because of the veil of karma which covers the soul. It can exercise the capacity if it can remove the veil. As against the contact theory, which can be attributed to Nyaya, the Jaina theory of knowledge can be called unveiling theory of knowledge. Jainas believed that with the help of intensive austerity and spiritual practice, it is possible to destroy or remove forever all types of knowledge obscuring karmas from the soul. In such a state, the intrinsic capacity of the soul to know everything becomes manifest. This type of knowledge is called supreme knowledge, Kevala Jnana, or which is nothing but omniscience. This notion of soul, according to which knowledge is intrinsic and knowledge obscuring karma is extrinsic to it, itself becomes a basis for the possibility of omniscience. However, the Jaina idea of omniscience in the sense of the knowledge of everything, past, present and future, that is the knowledge of all substances with their past, present and future changing as well as stable attributes, was problematic, at least for two reasons. One, an omniscient being is supposed to know directly all the past, present and future modes of all substances, but direct knowledge by its very nature can have only present modes as its objects. Past and future modes by their very nature are not present, hence omniscience as a direct knowledge becomes impossible. I mean, these are some of the doubts that I am raising, and that is not what Jainas are saying. Knowledge by its very nature is about something. This aboutness, I mean, Sarvajna, one who knows everything means he has knowledge about everything. So this aboutness indicates a relation. Hence, direct knowledge seems to presuppose a certain contact or connection of soul with the object, but Jainas hold that knowledge which is direct in the strict sense of the term does not involve any contact of the soul with the object. How they can explain aboutness of the omniscient knowledge would be a problem. This extreme concept of omniscience was not acceptable as the final view to some Jaina philosophers also. I mean, Jainas also, some Jaina philosophers had doubt about this notion of omniscience. For example, Kunda, an important Jaina thinker of 1st century CE, made a distinction between conventional view and decisive view, Vyavaharanaya and Nishchayanaya. This is something which is parallel to Lokasamvriti Satya and Paramartha Satya, or Vyavaharika Satta and Paramarthika Satta of Vedanta, Lokasamvriti Satya and Paramarthata Satya of Buddhism. But this is not the mainstream Jaina view. This was presented by Kundacharya, and according to some scholars, Kundakundacharya was under the influence of Vedanta. So, I mean, he, so to say, tried to introduce Vedanta type of perspective within Jainism. So, he said that from conventional point of view, you may say that omniscience means knowledge of everything in the true in the literal sense of the term. But from decisive point of view, what he called Nishchayanaya, it is just self-knowledge. What is omniscience? Omniscience means knowledge of oneself. He claimed that the idea of omniscience in the sense of knowledge of each and everything is only the conventional view. According to the decisive view, omniscience means knowledge of the self. However, by and large, Jaina logicians attempted to defend the knowledge of the notion of omniscience in its absolute form. I mean, I have discussed the problem of omniscience in one of my articles. I have just given the reference. You can refer to it. Now, non-absolutism. The third salient feature of the early Jaina epistemology is its non-absolutism. It can be understood as the manifestation of its non-violent approach in the intellectual realm. Jaina scriptures attach great importance to non-violence. So, we have seen that when they talk about right conduct, samyak charitra, in that they talk about great vows, and in those 5 great vows, ahimsa is the first great vow, and it is regarded as the highest principle by Jainas. So, it assumes the status of the highest principle in their scheme of values. Jainas advocated non-violence as the mode of conduct to be followed in all walks of life. Hence, it was to be practiced at the level of mind, body and speech. Secondly, it was to be practiced by avoiding injury to mind, body, speech and other life forces of others. It is ahimsa is understood as pranatipata viramana. Now, what is prana? So, prana, literal meaning of prana is just life or breathing and so on and so forth. But they define prana in such a way that it includes mind, body, speech. So, even injuring mind of the other person, injuring speech of the other person, that also would be regarded as a kind of himsa. Naturally, it was expected to be followed in the intellectual realm also. So, in the intellectual realm also, not harming the attitude, the thoughts of the other person was a part of ahimsa. We live in the world with persons with conflicting opinions. Maintaining conflicting relations in a form of violence, and the Lord Mahavira, as the advocate of non-violence, had to have a solution to this problem. His solution was the doctrine of Anekanta. The expression Anekanta is made of 3 terms, which literally means not one end, An-eka anta. The expression can be interpreted in 2 ways. So, either you join that an plus eka, that is aneka, many, aneka will be in many, and many antas, this is one derivation, and or we join one and end, one and eka and anta together, that is one end, and then negate one end. So, the expression can be interpreted in 2 ways. One sense of the expression can be called ontological and the other methodological. According to the ontological sense, the expression anekanta is the description of reality. It means that the reality has many characteristics. So, aneka anta, oneness and manyness, identity and difference, permanence and impermanence. So, reality has all these diverse and apparently mutually contradictory characteristics. They can be called extreme characteristics because they apparently contradict with each other. But according to Jainism, they coexist in reality without any contradiction. So, the contradictions are only apparent contradictions. In reality, there is no contradiction according to them. According to the methodological sense, the expression anekanta is the negation of ekanta. The latter expression stands for an extreme position. Ekantavada means an extreme position or absolute position. Jainism stands for Anekantavad as negation of Ekanta in this sense, which means non-absolutism. According to the Jaina estimation, the positions of all other schools of Indian philosophy were absolutist positions in some way or the other. So they claim that all other philosophical systems are absolutists and we are non-absolutists. Whereas Jainism avoids absolutism of all types. For instance, when the Buddhists say that all phenomena are impermanent, they hold that phenomena are absolutely impermanent. That is, they would not accept that in a way they are also permanent, in a way they are impermanent. They would say that they are impermanent and impermanent alone. So in that sense, it will be a kind of absolutism. On the other hand, non-dualist Vedantists say that ultimate reality is eternal. By that they mean that the reality is absolutely eternal. So there they would not accept that, okay, it is in some way you can regard ultimate reality as changing, in some way it is not changing. They would say that it is not changing at all. So in that sense it will be a kind of absolutist eternalism. So both these views are absolutist extreme views. Jainas try to avoid both the extremes, but at the same time accommodate both the views in their non-absolutist form. So they would say that yes, reality is eternal, but not absolutely eternal. Reality is non-eternal, but not absolutely non-eternal. So it is eternal and non-eternal both, but not none of them in absolute form. Hence Jaina says that reality is impermanent but not absolutely impermanent. It is permanent also but not absolutely permanent. Here Jainas define reality is that which has origination, destruction and continuity. We have seen the definition of Sat, real. This implies a different perspective to reality. It also implies a different conception of knowledge which can be called non-absolutist. According to it, knowledge should accommodate contrasting views of reality. It should be holistic and inclusive rather than partial and exclusive. The above three features, that is fivefold classification of knowledge, the doctrine of omniscience and the doctrine of non-absolutism, can be called the core features of the early Jaina epistemology. In the later development of Jaina epistemology, Jainas tried to preserve all the three features. They tried to accommodate the five types of knowledge in the new classification of pramana into direct and indirect. They included omniscience in this classification as the kind of ultimate perception, paramarthika pratyaksha, and they included the non-absolutist methodological approach in their conception of verbal testimony. While discussing Shabda Pramana, they accommodated Anekanta. Now, this is about the broad scriptural understanding of knowledge. Now, we go to the later period, transition from knowledge to pramana. The term central to the early Jaina epistemology was jnana, whereas in the later Jaina literature we find the use of the term pramana as central to Jaina epistemology. We find in the Jaina tradition that the theory of fivefold knowledge, which was accepted in its canonical stage, was transformed at the later stage into a system of pramanas. As a matter of fact, the term jnana in the above context means knowledge. This usage of the word jnana is different from the nyaya usage, according to which jnana means cognition. And the term pramana also can be taken to mean knowledge or means to knowledge. But the difference between the early discourse and the later discourse on knowledge is that in the canonical discourse, that is in the discourse centered on the term jnana, truth or authenticity and justifiability was taken for granted on the basis of faith, you can say. That is, you have to accept that this is jnana because Lord Mahavira said that this is jnana, and you have to follow it, you have to try to attain it. Or at least they were not a matter of concern. In the later discourse, that is discourse of pramana, there is a focus on truth or authenticity of knowledge and also on the justification of knowledge claims. The first such attempt, that is to say shift from jnana to pramana, is seen in Tattvartha Sutra, that is aphorisms of the essence of reality of Umaswati, the 1st-2nd century CE Jaina philosopher, who marked the transition from canonical stage to logical stage. He synthesized the fivefold classification of knowledge rooted in canonical Jainism with a broad classification of pramanas into direct and indirect. So, when Jainas classify pramanas, they give the classification of pramanas into direct and indirect. That is the first stage of classification, and then they further classify indirect knowledge into various kinds. After stating the fivefold classification of knowledge into empirical knowledge, verbal testimony, clairvoyance, telepathy and supreme knowledge, Umaswati says that out of them the first two are indirect, whereas the last three are direct. In this way, he correlated the traditional discourse on knowledge with the classification of pramanas into direct and indirect, which was the standard classification accepted in the later Jaina epistemology. As we have seen before, the epistemological inquiry, which centered on the concept of pramana, was initially introduced in the Nyaya tradition. Nyaya system, as it were, posed a challenge before other systems that if they want to justify their religious claims, which included metaphysical and axiological claims, they should have an appropriate pramana system. Hence, the discourse on pramana became important for each religious and philosophical system. Hence, we can say that through the Tattvartha Sutra of Umaswati, Jainism started a dialogue with the mainstream Indian epistemology. But the path of such a dialogue was not easy. Jainas must have soon realized that there were a few basic differences between Nyaya and Jaina perspectives on knowledge or pramana. Now, what are the differences between Nyaya and Jaina perspective on knowledge? Nyaya system defined pramana as an instrument of knowledge and made a sharp distinction between instrument of knowledge and knowledge, pramana and prama. For the Jaina thinkers, however, knowledge itself was pramana. They did not construe pramana as an instrument of knowledge, but as knowledge itself. And this is similar to the Jaina approach, Buddhist approach also, as we have seen. For Buddhists also, what is pramana? The resultant knowledge itself is pramana, not means to knowledge. Even sensory perception, which was included in empirical knowledge according to the canonical classification, was construed as a kind of indirect knowledge in the Jaina pramana theory, because even the sensory perception, according to them, is after all mediated by senses. So, as what Umaswati said in Tattvartha Sutra, that out of these 5 types of knowledge, Mati Jnana and Shruta Jnana, that is empirical knowledge and scriptural knowledge, are indirect, and clairvoyance and telepathy and omniscience, they are direct. So, Mati Jnana, that is empirical knowledge, was indirect knowledge, and in Mati Jnana what is included? Perception, inference, these types of knowledge are included in Mati Jnana. So, even the knowledge from pratyaksha, perceptual knowledge, also becomes indirect knowledge. That is the that becomes a problem for Jainas. So, because even the sensory perception, according to them, is after all mediated by senses, they held that the direct knowledge in its true sense should not be mediated even by senses. Direct knowledge is, according to them, the kind of knowledge the soul has without any medium. Then we have also seen that Nyaya advocated contact theory of perception. According to them, a chain of contacts among the soul, mind, sense organ and object is necessary for perceptual knowledge. Jainas held, on the other hand, that though certain forms of ordinary perception, for example, perception of touch, odor, taste and sound, are possible via sense-object contact, this is not the case with visual perception or mental perception. Particularly, extraordinary perception is possible not through contact but due to the intrinsic power of the soul to know. Then Jainas in fact were following 2 different conceptions of knowledge. When they were considering ordinary knowledge, that is empirical knowledge, the concept of pramana which they were following can be called logical concept. Jaina logicians, while articulating this concept, followed the paradigm of knowledge as determinate true cognition. But while talking about metaphysical knowledge, Jainas were not satisfied with the concept of determinate truth. They were in search of a pervasive vision of reality, the complete knowledge of reality, because they believed that only complete knowledge is metaphysically satisfactory and has emancipatory value. So we find that they also sometimes thought about pramana in the sense of complete knowledge, not just determinate true cognition. Last but not the least, there was a basic difference between the Nyaya and Jaina approaches to language. Can language accurately reflect our knowledge of the reality as it is? Nayayikas believed that it can. We have seen in the lecture on Nyaya that whatever is there can be known, and whatever can be known can be expressed in language, and I will also add it can be expressed in language with clarity, complete clarity, without ambiguity, and so on and so forth, according to Nyaya. Jainas did not accept this claim of the Nayayikas, though they accepted the possibility of omniscience. Knowledge of everything is possible, but they accepted at the same time the limits of language. That is, even the omniscient being, when he suppose he wants to express what he knows, definitely there will be great limits of language. Language is full of vagueness and ambiguities, due to which apparently contradictory descriptions of reality become possible. So any sentence can be interpreted in various ways, and therefore we can have different apparently contradictory claims about the same thing. These limitations of language cannot be overcome. These limitations of language can only be acknowledged by using the modal expressions such as syat, in a way, in a sense, from a certain point of view. These are the meanings of the word syat. We will come to that in tomorrow's talk. Now, Jaina account of verbal testimony as pramana in this way becomes unique in the context of Indian philosophy. Pause.